that are out there of extraterrestrial origin.
A large, hairy creature with arms that hang down beside bore down on its sides.
And I told him my name, and when I told him the name, he said he was called Code.
It was not anything from this earth that I'm quite sure of.
You're listening to the Strangeology Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Foran, and this is your place to explore the weird, strange, and unexplained. From cryptids and creatures, the paranormal, aliens and UFOs, forbidden knowledge, ancient mysteries, conspiracies, and more. Hey y'all, and welcome back to the show. It has been a minute. Also, Happy New Year to everyone out there, and thank you for bearing with me while the show was on a bit of an unexpected hiatus. I've been trying to post short form content over on all of my socials as best as I can, but the holidays got busy, home life and unexpected projects around the house got busy and ate up a lot of my free time over the last month and a half. But it's good to be back in the saddle with a new episode for y'all. For this edition of the show and the season 4 closer, also, side note, I might just be going with numbered episodes moving forward because, I don't know, it just kind of makes sense, maybe. We'll see. But today's topic is going to be about the Kecksburg UFO incident. It's a case that I'm sure many of you have heard of, but I felt like it was a fitting topic to do a deep dive into, to find out all the details and the theories, especially because of recent events that have been happening in New Jersey, elsewhere in the country, and even the world. And if you follow me on social media, you probably know that I've done a little bit of coverage on this, and I feel like I'd be doing a little bit of a disservice to not mention it on a Fortean podcast. But essentially, right after my last episode dropped, these strange objects started showing up in the skies over New Jersey. They were described as these SUV-sized drones, which also people have started to code word that as Dior bags, which I kind of hate. And state and local governments had no explanations for these things. And the federal government also seemed to either not know or were intentionally withholding information. Supposedly, they know what they are because they're not being shot down, but a lot of people were getting a bit worried throughout December. Some people would report seeing a large object or several of them hovering over or near their homes for hours and hours on end, which is uncharacteristic of drones to be able to have battery life that long. Nobody knew exactly where these things were coming from, but some reports were suggesting that they were being launched from a ship around 60 miles off the east coast of New Jersey. Some politicians claimed that, quote unquote, on good authority, that it was from foreign adversaries. But then these things started to be seen in New York, Pennsylvania, New England, Maryland, Washington, D.C., Virginia, Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan, Arizona, California, Florida. I mean, it seems like every corner of the country. And people have also elsewhere in the world have started recording strange objects in the sky as well. So you can imagine there's all sorts of theories that have sprung up around these things. Now, a lot of these drones look like airplanes and have FAA compliant lighting. So the reality is that they are probably, most of them at least, or many, are just planes that are misidentified and there's mass hysteria going on. Understandable. But a lot of people are filming on their phones. They're zooming in and the lights get distorted and the bokeh effect happens. A lot of people think that these drones are morphing into orbs of light, and I get the confusion, but some of these things aren't really explainable as just regular conventional craft. It doesn't explain the objects that hover for hours and hours on end, longer than a conventional drone could. So it seems that there's all these theories, right? They could be a foreign adversaries like China or Iran. They most likely, it seems, last I knew, seemed to be ours. It seemed pretty clear after some time that it's likely human technology, at the very least, maybe from private companies, which is why the government is saying that they don't know what they are. They can't disclose more information. Like there's some kind of loophole there. But this event is still ongoing even into January. So I'm not so sure about that. Some people were saying like, oh, maybe it was a test and it was going to end by Christmas. But people are still filming these things, even if the news media has stopped really covering the topic. Now, there were some fear-mongering posts and theories about these drones looking for missing radioactive material, like a dirty bomb that was smuggled into the country, and these drones were outfitted with tech that could sniff out radiation. Although I think they would have found something by now. It turns out that the material in question, it seems, from an official report of the missing material was something used in a medical setting for imaging, like PET scans. Although other people have seen these drones spraying something in the air, which is pretty sus. But one of the more interesting things about this whole event is that the drones, or whatever they are, have been seen in tandem frequently with actual glowing balls of light, which many believe are something called plasmoids, which is a coherent plasma structure with its own magnetic field that forms into a toroidal shape. If you haven't listened to my interview episode with Dr. Robert Temple on A New Science of Heaven, he talks all about this kind of stuff, the Kordylewski clouds and everything of that nature. Super fascinating chat. So definitely go back, check that out if you haven't yet. So, maybe some of this is that, but there are other theories that claim that plasmoids can seem to be self-aware, or they're of some kind of conscious intelligence, and that they're said to be able to be a source of huge amounts of energy. So some think that the plasmoids came through this interdimensional rift that maybe the military was experimenting on, and maybe they're trying to harness the power. But I don't know. There's just so much going on with this story that it's hard to keep track of. But as the story develops, I'll probably do some updates here and there over on social media. And yeah, interesting stuff for sure. 2025 is ramping up to be an absolutely bonkers year already. But enough of that news update. Before I get started, make sure to subscribe to this show wherever you're listening to, and put your settings to auto download so you never miss a new episode. And so I don't go on too long, I'll have all of my other pertinent information at the end. And of course, follow me over on social media if you haven't yet for more content and updates. I'll have all those links in the show notes. All right, with that out of the way, let's get into the story of the Kecksburg UFO incident. Imagine living in a small, quiet town, only to wake up one day to find yourself at the center of one of the most debated UFO incidents in history. This is the story of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, a place forever marked by the strange and unexplained. In this episode, we're going to piece together the bizarre events of December 9th, 1965, the streaking fireball that lit up the skies, the strange metallic object found in the woods in this small western Pennsylvania town, and the sudden, almost theatrical appearance of military personnel to secure the scene. Was it a meteor? A Cold War experiment? Or was it something not of this earth? Before we dive into the details, let's set the stage. It's the mid-1960s, a time of radical change and tension throughout the world. The space race between the US and the Soviet Union was in full swing. Cold War paranoia was running at an all-time high, and the skies were being watched with intense scrutiny. This was a period when anything unusual in the air wasn't just a curiosity. Coming off the back of the Cuban Missile Crisis and the assassination of JFK, anything up there was a potential threat or a sign of something bigger. Now, Kecksburg, Pennsylvania is a quiet rural community about 30 miles southeast of Pittsburgh and near Mount Pleasant, a seemingly unlikely place for such an extraordinary event. But on that evening of December 9th, 1965, everything changed. Witnesses across 6 states and Canada saw this fiery object streaking through the sky, leaving a trail of smoke and speculation in its wake. By the time the object came down in the woods near Kecksburg, the world was already asking questions. Locals rushed to the crash site, expecting to find the remains of a meteor or perhaps a downed aircraft. What they claimed to see instead was something far stranger, a metallic, acorn or bell-shaped object covered in mysterious symbols. And within hours, the military arrived, cordoning off the area and transporting the object away under heavy guard. And just like that, the story of Kecksburg was born. December 9th, 1965, the night something fell from the sky and changed the quiet town of Kecksburg forever. It all started in the late afternoon, around 4:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Across this vast swath of North America, people started seeing something in the sky. Witnesses from Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and parts of Canada all reported seeing a massive object. Many described it as being like a fireball with blue-green flames streaking across the sky. To some, it looked like a meteor. To others, it seemed almost like an aircraft on fire going down. Some witnesses in the Pittsburgh area even reported sonic booms, blaming the noise on this mystery fireball. Others reported seeing strange wisps of blue-green smoke rising out of the forest where this object crashed down, and they even felt vibrations and heard the sound of its impact on the ground. But what stood out to many witnesses was how this object behaved. It wasn't like a typical meteor, which usually travels in a straight trajectory. Instead, this object seemed to slow down, almost gliding as it neared the ground. Some even claimed it changed direction slightly before disappearing behind the trees in the forest it crashed in. Witnesses described it as controlled, almost deliberate, a characteristic meteors do not possess. The fireball was seen descending into the woods just outside of Kecksburg, and moments later, a loud thud echoed across the hills, followed by reports of a strange metallic noise. Naturally, people in this small town immediately grew curious. They didn't know what was going on. Was it a plane crash, a meteor, or something else entirely? One witness, a then 20-year-old man and volunteer firefighter named James Romansky, was among the first on the scene. He and several others rushed into the woods, expecting to find a wrecked aircraft. Instead, they claimed to see what was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Nestled in the dirt was this large metallic object, shaped like an acorn. It was about 10 to 12 feet in height and 8 to 10 feet in diameter, with a golden bronze sheen that reflected the fading sunlight. According to James, this object was large enough for someone to stand in it. Now, this is where things get stranger. The object wasn't just a chunk of metal. Along with its base were strange symbols. Some described them as looking like Egyptian hieroglyphics or runes. One witness likened the markings to ancient Sanskrit, while another thought that they resembled mathematical formulas. The surface on the object appeared smooth, almost seamless, with no visible rivets or anything that you'd see on a conventional aircraft. Another key detail that's important to mention is that the object didn't appear to have crash-landed in the traditional sense. It wasn't buried into a crater or broken into pieces. Instead, it seemed to have come to a controlled stop, almost as if it had gently landed rather than plummeted to Earth. Think of the SpaceX rocket tests, where instead of just letting the rocket boosters crash back into the ocean, they've engineered technology to guide them back for a controlled and safe landing. As more residents arrived, word of the crash began to spread. Someone, no one knows exactly who, called the local authorities, and soon the area was buzzing with activity. Police officers, more volunteer firefighters, and curious townsfolk converged on the site, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. But just as quickly as the excitement built, someone else showed up: the United States military. Eyewitnesses recalled a convoy of military vehicles, jeeps, trucks, even flatbed trailers rolling into Kecksburg with purpose. Soldiers armed and serious set up a perimeter around the crash site. Local authorities and civilians were ordered to leave the area immediately, and those who resisted were met with stern warnings or outright threats. According to some accounts, soldiers were seen with Geiger counters scanning for radiation, though this detail remains unverified. Now, the presence of the military raised immediate suspicions. Why would the US government be so interested in what they initially described as a meteor or later space debris? Witnesses claim they saw the acorn-shaped object being loaded onto a flatbed truck under heavy security. From there, it was reportedly whisked away to an undisclosed location, never to be seen again. In the aftermath, the locals were left in the dark. Some were furious, feeling that their government was hiding something from them. Others were simply bewildered. What had they just witnessed? And why was it being treated like a matter of national security? The story didn't stay contained to Kecksburg for long, much like the infamous case of Roswell, New Mexico. The next day, local and national news outlets picked up the story. Headlines read, "Unidentified object crashes in Pennsylvania," and reporters speculated about what the mysterious object might have been. Some newspapers quoted official sources who downplayed the event as a natural phenomenon. Others focused on witness accounts that described something far more unusual. One notable piece of coverage came from John Murphy, who was a radio station journalist from WHJB. Murphy interviewed several eyewitnesses and even visited the crash site himself before the military cordoned it off. He became convinced that the object was something extraordinary and began working on an investigative report titled Object in the Woods. However, before he could air his findings, Murphy claimed that he was visited by government agents who confiscated his materials and warned him not to pursue the story further. Murphy's story added fuel to the fire, becoming one of the most cited examples of alleged government suppression related to the Kecksburg incident. Over the years, the accounts of what happened in Kecksburg have been scrutinized, debated, and in some cases, even discredited. Critics argue that witness testimonies are unreliable, influenced by time, media sensationalism, and the human tendency to embellish. For instance, some witnesses described the object as glowing brightly, while others said it appeared cold and lifeless. Similarly, the description of the strange markings varies widely, with no consensus on their appearance or meaning. But despite these inconsistencies, many witnesses have stuck to their stories even decades later. For them, what they saw that night was not a figment of their imagination. It was real, and it was extraordinary. To fully understand the significance of what happened that night, we also have to consider the broader context. This was 1965, the height of the Cold War. The US and the Soviet Union were locked in a technological and ideological battle that extended far beyond Earth's atmosphere. Just 4 years earlier, Yuri Gagarin had become the first man to orbit the planet, and John F. Kennedy had committed America to landing on the moon by the end of the decade. The space race wasn't just about exploration, it was a show of power, innovation, and dominance. It's no wonder then that anything falling from the sky, especially something unexplained, would attract immediate attention from the military. Could the Kecksburg object have been a Soviet satellite, a secret US spacecraft, or was it something that neither side wanted to admit knowing about? What we know for sure is that something came down in Kecksburg that night, and its impact, both literal and metaphorical, has rippled throughout history. The details of the incident, from the strange behavior of the fireball to the swift and secretive actions of the military, raise far more questions than answers. But let's dive deeper into the government's role in the aftermath of the crash. Were they simply cleaning up space debris, or was there a more sinister agenda at play? As the mysterious events of December 9th, 1965 unfolded in Kecksburg, one of the most striking aspects of the story was the swift and decisive involvement of the US government. The official response to the incident has become a cornerstone of the case, fueling decades of speculation and allegations of a cover-up. Witness accounts consistently describe the arrival of heavily armed military personnel from the Army and the Air Force who arrived within hours of this alleged crash. Local witnesses who had approached the forest where the object went down, including members of the news media who had also come out to the scene, reported seeing unmarked trucks, jeeps, and armed soldiers converging onto the wooded area where this object had supposedly landed. According to locals, the military quickly took control of the site and cordoned off the forest and ordered civilians and local authorities to leave. Although some civilians did report trying to sneak into the woods to catch a glimpse of the object that crashed, but were quickly intercepted and turned around by the military, often at the threat of gunpoint. This immediate and authoritative response raises a critical question. How did the military know to mobilize so quickly? One plausible explanation is that radar systems detected the object as it entered Earth's atmosphere. During the Cold War, both the US and the Soviet Union maintained extensive radar networks to monitor the skies for potential threats, such as incoming missiles or spacecraft. And if the object's descent was tracked in real time, that would explain the military's rapid deployment. However, this explanation doesn't account for the secrecy that followed. Witnesses claim that soldiers refused to answer questions about their purpose, and some described being threatened with arrest if they didn't vacate the area. And this heavy-handed approach only added to the suspicion. One of the most compelling details of the Kecksburg incident is the alleged removal of this acorn-shaped object. Several witnesses did report seeing some kind of object loaded onto a flatbed truck, covered with a tarp, and escorted out of the area under heavy guard. The destination? Well, that remains a mystery. Over the years, researchers have speculated about where the object might have been taken to, with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio being the leading theory. Wright-Patterson has long been associated with UFO lore, most notably as the rumored repository for wreckage from the Roswell crash in 1947. Another possibility is that a secret government lab or military base unknown to the public could be where the object was taken to be analyzed without public scrutiny. But what happened to the object after it was removed from Kecksburg? Did it even exist in the first place? Well, that depends on who you ask. In the immediate aftermath of the incident, the US government provided a straightforward explanation. The fireball seen across the sky was simply a meteor. The Air Force stated that nothing unusual was found in Kecksburg and that the alleged object was likely just a natural phenomenon. However, these explanations were quickly pointed out for their inconsistencies. For starters, meteors don't typically change direction or slow down as they approach the ground. Witnesses also described the object as intact and having metallic qualities. This is inconsistent with most meteorite debris, which would likely shatter or vaporize on impact. This suggests something technological instead. A second explanation emerged in the form of a possible Soviet satellite. During the Cold War, the US kept a close eye on Soviet space activity, and there was significant concern about foreign technology falling into American territory. Some researchers have suggested that the object could have been the Cosmos 96 satellite, a failed Soviet Venus probe that re-entered Earth's atmosphere on the same day of the Kecksburg incident. However, this theory has its own problems. According to NASA, the trajectory of Cosmos 96 doesn't match the fireball seen over North America. Additionally, the timing of its re-entry doesn't align with the reported crash in Kecksburg. Cosmos 96 entered the atmosphere over Canada around 3:18 a.m., where the Kecksburg object was observed at 4:47 p.m., over 13 hours later. Even the Russians denied that the Kecksburg object was their satellite. So, if it wasn't a meteor or Soviet technology, what was it? Now, of course, this incident happened during a pivotal time for UFO research as well with the government. The Air Force's Project Blue Book, a program established to investigate UFO sightings, was still active in 1965. Over its 22-year history, Project Blue Book collected and analyzed thousands of UFO reports, categorizing most, but not all of them, as misidentified natural phenomena or conventional aircraft. But not all cases were explained. Interestingly, the Kecksburg case was included in Project Blue Book's records, but the official conclusion was that it was unremarkable. It was also claimed that there was not a significant presence of military that evening in Kecksburg. Rather, a nearby radar station in Pittsburgh only sent out 3 personnel to check out what had crashed. However, we can quickly dismiss that claim, as newspapers like the Greenburgh PA Tribune-Review had headlines the following day, on December 10th, that read, "Unidentified flying object falls near Kecksburg," and "Army ropes off the area." It also ran a headline that said searchers failed to find object, despite several witnesses seeing the Army leaving with something large on a flatbed truck that was covered with a tarp. And as we know, in the end, the Air Force and Army dismissed the incident as merely being a meteor sighting, offering no further investigation. This minimal response has been criticized by UFO researchers as either a missed opportunity or a deliberate attempt to downplay and cover up the event. Perhaps the most enduring aspect of the Kecksburg UFO incident is the belief that the government engaged in this cover-up. Witnesses described being silenced or intimidated by military personnel, and key evidence such as photos, debris, and official reports have seemingly vanished over the years. And one of the most compelling pieces of testimony did come from John Murphy, the WHJB radio journalist I mentioned earlier. Murphy was among the first to report the crash and claimed to have obtained photographs of this object. However, he was later told by his colleagues that government agents had come in and confiscated his materials, and they also pressured him to drop the story. Murphy's reluctance to discuss the incident publicly afterward only deepened suspicions that something else was in play in Kecksburg. Even more troubling is the fate of NASA's records related to the Kecksburg incident. For 50 years, NASA refused to release any documentation they had regarding this event, which further fueled speculation that there was some kind of cover-up about a downed craft. In the early 2000s, investigative journalist Leslie Kean, who would later become the reporter who broke the Tic Tac UFO story through the New York Times in 2017, filed a lawsuit against NASA demanding the release of documents under the Freedom of Information Act. And after years of legal battles, NASA admitted that some records were, quote, lost or destroyed, a revelation that only further fuels conspiracy theorists. So if the government was covering something up, what could it have been? Well, we've gone over a few so far, but let's dive a little deeper. One possibility is that the object was a classified military project of the United States. One possibility is that the object was a classified U.S. military project. During the 1960s, the U.S. was heavily invested in developing advanced aircraft, satellites, and reconnaissance technology. If the object was a failed experiment or a prototype, the government would have had every reason to secure and conceal it. Another theory is that the object was indeed a Soviet satellite, but not the Cosmos 96. Some researchers speculate that it could have been an unrecorded or clandestine Soviet space mission. If the US recovered Soviet tech, it would have been a significant intelligence coup, another reason for secrecy. And of course, the most tantalizing theory is that the object was not of this Earth. Witnesses' descriptions of the acorn-shaped object and its strange markings align with what many imagine an alien spacecraft might look like. If this theory is true, the government's response makes sense. The recovery of an extraterrestrial craft would have been the ultimate national security priority. And we'll get into some more details about that shortly. Regardless of what this object was, the government's actions raise a broader question. Why the secrecy? Some argue that the Cold War climate demanded it. In a time when every technological advantage mattered, revealing too much about what was found, or even admitting that something was found at all, could have had serious geopolitical consequences. And others believe the secrecy goes deeper, suggesting a coordinated effort to suppress knowledge of extraterrestrial life. This idea ties into broader conspiracy theories about government involvement in the UFO phenomena, such as Roswell, Area 51, and other high-profile cases. Now, whether you believe the Kecksburg incident was a case of government overreach, Cold War paranoia, or something far more extraordinary, one thing is clear. The events of that night left an indelible mark on the world of UFO research. The military's swift and secretive actions, the disappearance of key evidence, and the conflicting explanations all point to a deeper mystery, one that continues to captivate and confound investigators to this day. So, what was this object? First off, we have the most simple and widely accepted explanation from the scientific and skeptic community. This object was simply a meteor. Fireballs, extremely bright ones, are not uncommon, and their appearance often generates UFO reports. As it turns out, the American Meteor Society recorded hundreds of sightings of a fireball streaking across the sky over North America on December 9th. Witnesses described it as brilliant, fast-moving, and accompanied by a roaring sound, consistent with meteors burning up as they enter Earth's atmosphere. Now, this theory explains some of the aspects of the incident, but leaves significant questions unanswered. For one, meteors typically travel in a straight line and don't alter their trajectory. Yet many witnesses reported that the Kecksburg fireball appeared to slow down, change direction, and even went into a glide before crashing. Such behavior would be highly unusual for a natural object. Additionally, meteors that make it to the ground often vaporize or shatter into small fragments, but the object that was seen in Kecksburg was described as intact and acorn-shaped, and there was no crater. These details seem inconsistent with a meteor impact. Now, despite these inconsistencies, skeptics argue that the meteor explanation aligns with the most basic facts of the events. For those seeking a straightforward answer, it is an attractive theory. But for many, it's not nearly enough to explain all of the strange details of that night. Next, let's consider the possibility that the object was man-made, a satellite or some kind of spacecraft. During the 1960s, the US and the Soviet Union were launching satellites at a rapid pace and competing for dominance in the space race. Satellites would occasionally deorbit and re-enter Earth's atmosphere, creating these spectacular fireball-like displays. Now, we know that Cosmos 96, that Soviet Venus probe, failed to leave Earth and re-entered the atmosphere on December 9th. However, the timeline doesn't line up with the object that was seen over Kecksburg, and again, Russia denied that this object was theirs. But still, the possibility remains that the object was another piece of Cold War technology, perhaps a secret US or Soviet satellite that was never publicly acknowledged. In this scenario, the military's rapid response to the situation does make sense. They would have been eager to recover and secure their technology before it could fall into the wrong hands. And it's also been proposed that it could have been a piece of American technology as well, either from crashed space debris or a piece of a plane that broke off over Canada, eventually landing in western Pennsylvania. Interestingly, when Project Blue Book investigated this case, it reported that no U.S. space or aircraft debris was reported on December 9th. Next up is the most tantalizing theory of all, the one that suggests that this mystery object was not from Earth, that it was indeed an alien craft of some sort. Witnesses described the object as having an almost otherworldly appearance. It was smooth, seamless, marked with symbols they couldn't identify, and it looked certainly like no conventional aircraft or piece of technology that we had during that era. Additionally, its observed behavior in the sky by hundreds of people or more, seeing it slow down, change direction, and glide down, is evidence that something intelligent seemed to be controlling it. And let's consider the implications of this theory. If this object was extraterrestrial, what was it doing here? Could it have been a probe sent to observe Earth? Or was it perhaps a spacecraft that malfunctioned and crashed? Either way, the military's swift response and subsequent secrecy could be explained by the discovery of alien technology. And of course, recovering and reverse engineering such an object would have been a top priority for any government. Prominent Fortean researcher Stan Gordon was very involved in this case, interviewing several witnesses and trying to get to the bottom of what really happened back in 1965. To add to the evidence of this theory, one witness described to Stan Gordon that they arrived at the scene and found the object well before the military arrived. They also described this object as acorn-shaped, as we know, and large enough for an adult man to sit inside. The color of it was a bronze gold. It also had the strange hieroglyphic-type writing on it. But here's the kicker. They swore that they could see an arm hanging out of it that had 3 digits on its hand, instead of the normal 5 that a human would have. And it also looked like it had lizard-like skin. Another witness, a man who was stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, later came forward claiming that he saw an alien body laying on a workbench around the time that the Kecksburg craft was brought in. He described it as being 4 to 5 feet tall, looking like it weighed about 80 pounds, and also described reptilian skin. In addition to that, a man named Don Sebastian, who was in Kecksburg during the crash, had attempted to go into the forest where it went down to go find it. But before finding it, he heard the blood-curdling screams of some kind of creature that frightened him out of the woods. Was it an alien? Well, the answer is we don't know for sure. And of course, the theory also ties into a broader pattern of UFO sightings and alleged crashes. Kecksburg isn't the only case where witnesses reported military involvement in mysterious recoveries. Roswell in 1947, Shag Harbor in 1967, and other high-profile cases that share all of these striking similarities. And we have one final theory that was proposed by John Venter and Owen Eichler in 1991, which says that the Kecksburg object was likely a GE Mark II reentry vehicle after the US government declassified documents regarding this experimental craft. The GE Mark II was designed as a nuclear test reentry body and was part of a top-secret program during the 50s and 60s, which focused on testing aerodynamics, materials, and survivability of objects like ballistic missiles re-entering Earth's atmosphere at high speeds. Venter and Eichler believed that they found 4 similarities in the GE Mark II compared to eyewitness descriptions of the Kecksburg object. The GE craft had 4 control jets, which could have explained how the object seemed to come down in a controlled manner, changing direction, slowing down, or gliding down so it didn't crash. It also was constructed out of this copper alloy, which also lines up with the green flames that were observed by the witnesses. The GE Mark II also had a bell-like or acorn-shaped design to it, making it very similar to what was described in Kecksburg. And if this object truly was a GE Mark II, which was top secret at the time, it also would explain the massive military presence and recovery effort, as well as downplaying and covering up the event, as they wouldn't want word of it to get out to the wrong people or the Soviet Union at the height of the Cold War. However, there are some problems with this theory. Despite extensive investigations and Freedom of Information Act requests, no declassified documents have ever conclusively linked the GE Mark II or any other secret reentry vehicle to the Kecksburg incident. Even to this day, the government still maintains that it was simply a meteor. And while the GE Mark II had boosters on it, they likely would have only been used in orbit and not during descent. And it would suggest a level of control beyond the technology of the time. Taking witness testimony into account is important as well, as most witnesses described it looking unlike anything they had ever seen. And although the GE Mark II was an advanced piece of tech for its time and did look kind of bell or acorn shaped, it was still very well into the realm of human engineering of the time and would likely have still been recognizable as the nuts and bolts object that the GE Mark II was. And if it was a GE Mark II, after the documents on it were declassified in the 90s, why has the Kecksburg object not been officially explained as being this craft? Ultimately, if it was a secret technology program, it was likely something else. Of course, not everyone is convinced that the Kecksburg object was anything extraordinary. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence after all. Some skeptics argue that the entire event can be explained by a combination of natural phenomena, human error, and media sensationalism. They point out that eyewitness accounts are often unreliable, especially in high-stress situations. Memories can be influenced by time, emotions, and even the power of suggestion. For example, some witnesses described the object as glowing brightly, while others said that it appeared cold and metallic. Similarly, the markings on the object were interpreted in various ways, from being something like hieroglyphics to random scratches or even Sanskrit. These inconsistencies have led skeptics to dismiss the case as a mix of misidentified natural phenomena and overactive imaginations. But for believers, these explanations fail to address the core mysteries of the case: the object's behavior, the military's involvement, and the apparent efforts to suppress the information about it. Regardless of which theory you find most convincing, the Kecksburg incident raises profound questions. If the object was a meteor or a satellite, why the secrecy? If it was a military experiment, what were they testing, and why was it hidden from the public? And if it was extraterrestrial, what does that mean for our understanding of life in the universe? These questions are not just theoretical, they touch on issues of transparency, accountability, and the role of governments in managing knowledge about extraordinary phenomena, much like today. The Kecksburg case reminds us that the truth, whatever it might be, has implications that reach far beyond the boundaries of one small Pennsylvania town. As we've seen, the theories surrounding Kecksburg are as varied as they are compelling. Whether you lean toward natural explanations, Cold War technology, or alien origins, one thing is certain: the events of December 9th, 1965 continue to captivate and challenge us. But before we wrap up, there are a few other things to mention regarding the impact of this event within UFO lore and its ongoing relevance in modern discussions about UFOs and UAPs. It's been nearly 6 decades after the events of Kecksburg, and to this day, it remains one of the most enduring and debated cases in UFO history. And while we may never know the full truth of what happened that night, the legacy of Kecksburg has transcended the initial mystery. Today, the legacy of the event lives on. As a small rural town, the UFO incident has become a defining part of Kecksburg, like so many of the small towns that experience high strangeness, such as cryptid encounters or even other UFO sightings. Every year, Kecksburg's volunteer fire department hosts an annual UFO festival, which draws visitors from all over. The festival features UFO-themed parades, guest speakers, and there's even a replica of the acorn-shaped object described by witnesses that can be found near the local volunteer fire station. The story of the Kecksburg UFO has embedded itself in the town's culture, and it's a big way for this little town to embrace its place in UFO lore. And beyond Kecksburg itself, the incident has left a significant imprint on popular culture. The story's been featured in countless books, documentaries, TV shows, each offering its own perspective on the events that took place back then. One of the most influential portrayals came from Unsolved Mysteries, the iconic TV show that introduced a generation to the strange and unexplained. The Kecksburg episode, which was the season 3 premiere, aired on September 19th, 1990, and really brought national attention to this case and introduced it to millions of viewers who would otherwise have never heard about it, and really helped to put Kecksburg on the map. Other shows like The X-Files have also drawn inspiration from Kecksburg. While the series didn't directly reference this particular incident, its themes of government cover-ups, extraterrestrial encounters were clearly influenced by cases like this. Even films like Close Encounters of the Third Kind or E.T. do owe a debt of cultural groundwork laid by real-world UFO stories like Kecksburg. And over the decades, the incident has been cited by many researchers and people who are enthusiastic about UFOs as a prime example of alleged government secrecy surrounding the UFO phenomena, and has laid groundwork for researchers and other ufologists to move forward towards disclosure. Especially in the last few years, as the conversation around UFOs has taken on a new level of seriousness, and the public has been officially made aware of certain programs by the government that were previously unknown or classified that have been studying UFO or UAP phenomena. Now, as far as what I think, well, it's hard to say exactly. I want to believe that it was a bona fide UFO from another world that crash landed on Earth, but as the saying goes, like I said before, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But something was covered up by the military and government that night. I highly doubt that it was just a meteor. So we're left with the other options. It could have been alien, but it also very well could have been a piece of our own experimental technology at the time, especially with all of the Cold War paranoia. It's something to consider. What's certain is that the Kecksburg UFO incident is that it's left a legacy far greater than anyone could have imagined on that chilly night in 1965. All right, thanks again so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and thanks again for bearing with me during my holiday abstinence. But we're going to be getting back on track, and there is a lot of great stuff that I want to cover in 2025, so stay tuned for all of that. And with all the UFO, UAP activity happening around the world right now, maybe we'll soon get a real answer as to what really happened in Kecksburg way back when. As always, I want to give a huge thank you to everyone out there who checks out the Strangeology podcast. Those of you who download it, share it with friends and family. Word of mouth helps me out a ton when you do that. The Strangeology podcast wouldn't be possible without the support of listeners like you. The best way to support the show is to tell your friends and anyone who loves the strange and unexplained. I appreciate it so much. And if you want to help support the show, you can head on over to patreon.com/Strangeology, where you can become a member for as little as $1 per month. Any support helps out a ton and helps keep the lights on here at Strangeology HQ. Higher tiers unlock more benefits, like early access to new episodes that are also ad-free. You also gain access to the members-only episode extension, Strangeology Beyond, which is a whole other research topic or extended guest interview. There's also a merch discount for my shop, exclusive merch, voting power, bonus content, and more. So if you want to be part of a growing community of like-minded people who are into the strange and unexplained, it's a great place to be. I appreciate the support so much, and the more of it that I get, the more content that I can create for everyone out there. And to those members out there, thank you so much for your continued support. I love you all. And again, if you want to join this ever-growing community of fellow lovers of the weird, you can check it out at patreon.com/Strangeology. To any advertisers or companies out there looking to collaborate with the Strangeology podcast, or if you'd like to be considered for an interview on the show, please send all inquiries to info@strangeology.com. And if you haven't yet, make sure to give me a follow over on all my social media accounts. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, X, and TikTok. I'm most active posting short form content on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook as well. So if you're looking for more from me in between podcast episodes, definitely check that out. Also, if you enjoy discussing the strange and unexplained and want to be part of a community beyond the show, you can head on over to my Discord. You can join for free, and the link will be in the show notes. People can discuss anything on there: cryptids, UFOs, ghosts, conspiracies, mysteries. It's a good time. We'll see you there. And also make sure to check out the official Strangeology website, strangeology.com. I've got a blog there with a bunch of articles, which I'll hopefully be adding more to soon. You can also sign up to my mailing list to receive updates and get occasional promo codes to my shop. And if you're looking for an additional way to support what I do, you can check out my Etsy shop at strangeology.etsy.com, where I have a whole assortment of cryptid, alien, and Fortean gear available on things like t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, long sleeves. There's also stickers, magnets, prints, pins, mugs, tumblers, and more. I had a bunch of new designs for the holidays, and I'll be trying to add some more as we move into the rest of the winter season and into spring. So always check back often. I do all my own designs, and it's a fun time. So if you're looking for some merch for yourself or a loved one who is into cryptids, aliens, the strange and unexplained, definitely check it out. Again, the link is strangeology.etsy.com. I appreciate the support so much. All right. That's all for me for now. I'm going to take a quick break here, and when I come back for Strangeology Beyond, the members only portion of the show, we're going to take a look at another fascinating theory about the Kecksburg UFO incident, going all the way back to the Second World War. You won't want to miss it. Members, stick with me, and for everyone else, until the next time, take care of yourselves and each other, and keep it strange. All right, welcome back to Strangeology Beyond, everyone. Of course, your exclusive members only bonus segment of the show. I hope you enjoyed today's regular show. It's really good to be back, and hopefully we can keep a regular schedule here in